Hello and welcome to the dungeon. I'm your host Rob. In today's video I want to talk a little bit about the Sorcerer, specifically the Wild Magic Sorcerer. And I realize I haven't done a Sorcerer only video. I've done a lot of videos multi-classing Sorcerers because they're one of my favorite classes to multi-class, but I haven't done an actual Sorcerer video. And I want to talk, this is going to be kind of a combination of just not really build video, but more my thoughts and reflections on the Wild Magic Sorcerer in general. Because I have a lot of problems with the class and the way it works, but it's not the concept behind it. And I know I'm probably going to make a lot of people angry with this video, but I love the idea of the Wild Magic Sorcerer. I just wish that the surges happened a lot more often. So we're going to talk about that in a bit. We're going to talk about maybe some ideas of like house rules of how we can maybe change it and make things a little more fun. Because when I think about the Wild Magic Sorcerer, I don't think about a guy who wants to like optimize every single point. That's not why you're playing this class. You're playing it because you want weird and crazy things to happen. And that's where a lot of the fun comes in. If you're playing this class, you're the type of person who doesn't mind that you dropped a fireball on your entire party and wiped them all out accidentally. You don't mind that you cast confusion and hit all your allies instead of the enemies. Sorry. And I think that it takes a certain type of mindset to play the class, which is fine. And I think it takes a certain mindset of players and teammates at your table as well. Because you might think it's a lot of fun to drop a fireball and wipe the whole party out. And your dungeon master might think that's a lot of fun too, because it probably is. But you also need players at your table who are going to be cool with it as well. So we'll take a look at some of the abilities from the Wild Magic Sorcerer, and then we'll talk about just kind of my thoughts on the class in general, and where it's really strong, where it's not so strong, and maybe ways that we could just kind of tweak things and make it better. So sorcerers are one of the rare classes where you get to choose your subclass right at level 1. And with the Wild Magic Sorcerer in particular, I kind of like that idea that, the magic is some sort of weird, uncontrollable thing that just kind of like surges beyond your limits to contain and just does weird stuff. That part of it is great. The Wild Magic table is great. All that stuff is fine. My problem is that in a lot of ways, you just feel like kind of a bargain basement wizard. And that's not just the Wild Magic Sorcerer, that's all sorcerers. And I know that meta magic is awesome. I'm not trying to complain about meta magic. That multi-classing, because charisma, that is the main reason to play a sorcerer, because meta magic is awesome. And I'm not trying to complain about that at all. But let's be honest, you don't have ritual spell casting. You have way less spells known than the wizard, and you have an inferior spell list. You don't have any unique sorcerer spells. Basically, you have spells from the wizard list with a bunch of spells crossed off, and that's what you have. So you have access to a lot of their good ones, but not all, and they have spells that you don't. You have no spells that they don't. And even a lot of the meta magic can be kind of duplicated by different wizard schools. And yes, it's more limited in the case of wizards. Like an enchantment school can basically twin their enchantment spells, but they can't twin like a Finger of Death or a Disintegrate. So they are a lot more limited in a lot of those kind of aspects. I'm not saying it's as good, but it does take away some of the uniqueness of being a sorcerer. And I think that's one of my problems with the sorcerer in general, is that it just feels too much like the wizard. And I think that's one of the reasons I like the Wild Magic Sorcerer, is because at least it feels unique and different from everything else. So if we look at the abilities, at level 1, you're going to get your Wild Magic Surge. Anytime you cast a spell of first level or higher, the DM could have you roll for a Wild Magic Surge. If you roll a 1 on a 1 die 20, you trigger a Surge, and then you roll on a Surge table. Honestly, this is kind of probably why you're playing this class, is because you want Wild Magic Surges. And the Surge table, like I said, is awesome. I am not complaining about the table. I've even seen people who've made their own tables and expanded it further. I think that's a fun idea. So there's nothing wrong with that. I just wish it happened more often. So that's why I mentioned house rules. We'll look at those in a minute. But in general, your dungeon master could tell you that they just don't care, or they don't want to have you roll for surges. I mean, that, in which case, why are you even playing the class? You also get tied to chaos at level 1, and that is you can manipulate the forces of chance and chaos to gain advantage on one attack roll, ability check, or saving throw. Once you do so, you must finish a long rest before you can use this feature again. Anytime before you regain the use of this feature, the DM can have you roll on the Wild Magic Surge table immediately after you cast a sorcerer spell of first level or higher. You then regain the use of this feature. So, that's kind of cool. I like the fact that you could use this to try to force the DM to trigger Wild Magic Surges. That's kind of a fun aspect. And if your DM is just cool and willing to play with it, it means you could actually use this feature a lot. I actually think this ability is insanely good, and the ability to trigger advantage, especially on ability checks and saving throws, could be just a complete lifesaver. So that ability, I think, is really good. Level 6, you get Band Luck. Whenever you see another creature make an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw, you can use your reaction and spend 2 sorcery points to roll a 1d4 and apply it as a bonus or penalty, your choice, to the creature's roll. So it is kind of pricey. I mean, 2 sorcery points isn't exactly nothing, and it uses your reaction. But the good news is that as you get to higher and higher level, you have a lot of sorcery points. So, it's not a per short rest or long rest ability. You could actually use it a lot during the day. And for anyone who's ever seen, like, Bless, for example, in action, you know how often that D4 ends up being a total game saver for you, It is crazy the number of times you just miss a key saving throw by 1 or 2, and having an extra D4 to that could totally change an entire counter. So I really like that ability as well. It is a little steep, but I think it's also pretty good for what you're paying. I mean, your reaction, you might not have had anything you wanted to do with your reaction anyways. If you had a counterspell ready, that's going to be, a tough choice maybe. But, if you don't need counterspell in this fight, then go ahead, And like I said, 2 sorcery points, it's not nothing, but, you get a lot of sorcery points as you level up. You can also convert spells to more sorcery points. I think it's pretty good. At level 14, you get Controlled Chaos. Whenever you roll on the Wild Magic Surge table, you can roll twice and choose the result you want. And I think this is, I wouldn't say it's a powerful ability, but it's definitely a fun ability. Because if you do trigger an event and it ends up being really lame, it always feels really disappointing, because especially if you're only rolling, and you get a 1 on a D20 to trigger a surge, and then the surge ends up being boring, you're like, well, that sucked. So this at least lets you avoid the worst aspects, assuming that you want to avoid them, and it also gives you more options for just fun things to happen. So I think that, I wouldn't say it's a powerful ability, but I think it's a cool ability, and therefore I like it. Level 18, you get Spell Bombardment. Unfortunately, I think this ability kind of sucks. Basically, if you're rolling a bunch of damage dice, if any one of those die reaches max damage possible on that die, you can re-roll 1 extra die of damage and add it to whatever your roll was. So let's say you're casting a fireball, you roll your 8 dice 6 because you didn't upcast it, you get 2 6s. You can choose one of those 6s and then just roll again and add that to whatever your total was before. And here's my problem with it. That's just not really good for an 18th level ability. I mean, sure, you could roll a 6, but you could roll a 1. And I get the idea that just have it be exploding dice, and maybe you got 3 6s, and now you just get to roll them all, and then you get another 6, and you get to roll that, That might get kind of crazy and ridiculous, but that would also be awesome. So I think that could be kind of neat. But even if they capped it out, it said, like, maybe you can reroll all the dice that hit maximum once per die, right? Or something like that. Or you could do it a number of times, maxing out at your charisma bonus or whatever. I think that could be a lot of fun. As it is, I just, for an 18th level ability, it feels pretty weak. So it's fun, it's cool. I just don't think it's great. So let's talk a bit more about the meta magic, or about the Wild Magic Surges. And a couple of my ideas on possible house rules. And these aren't entirely mine. I've gotten these from other people, like Trent Monk suggested some of these in one of his videos, and I've seen other people on like forums and stuff talk about this. But some of these are my ideas as well. One would be the idea that every time you cast a spell, the chance of it surging goes up if it didn't surge. So you might start with a 1 on a d20, but if it doesn't surge, the next time it's a 2, and then a 3, and a 4, and it just keeps going. And I kind of like that idea that there's like this mounting tension in your game that, like, you know, you're up to like a 9 or less, and then you didn't surge, and then the next time it's like, oh no, it's a 10 or less, you know, and then you roll, you know, like it just keeps getting crazier and crazier. And I kind of like that idea. I think that might work even better if you used like a d10, for example, but you know, that's just my own thoughts. But that's an interesting idea. Treant Monk suggested in one of his videos, pretty much the opposite approach is that you roll like a d6 and it triggers on a 4, 5, or 6, for example. And then if it triggers, the next time you only roll a 5 or 6. And then if it triggers again, you only roll a d6. So the chance of it triggering gets less as you go, but the chance of a trigger is very, very high. I like that idea as well. I also like the idea that maybe it triggers automatically every time you try using, say, upcasting your spell. So you cast a fireball, but you cast it with a 5th level spell slot. The idea that you're trying to like push the spell and get it to do more than it's capable of usually doing could be the trigger for your Wild Magic Surges. And I really like that idea. Another concept that I thought of would be to tie it to your meta magic. And let's say you try to twin a spell, then you could have a Wild Magic Surge just for twin spell meta magics, and another one for, say, quicken spell meta magics, and another one, you know, for each one would have its own table. And maybe there wouldn't be D100s, maybe it'd only be a D12 or a D20 or whatever. But the point is, I like the idea that it's triggered to what you're trying to do. That, you know, maybe you want to cast Hold Person on a creature, but now you ended up accidentally twinning it onto yourself. Like maybe you tried to quicken it and it, you know, cast like really fast or really slow, or it affected more creatures, it affects less. Maybe you tried twinning, you know, a haste spell, but instead you cast haste on everything within like a 50-yard radius or something. Like that kind of stuff could be a lot of fun. I like the idea that your surges can just do really weird, crazy things too. Like maybe you accidentally cast Hold Person on every target within like 100 miles of you. And, you know, maybe, and it becomes permanent, for example, but they still get their saving throw at the end of every round. So eventually they might be able to break through. But I kind of like that idea. You know, the town hires you to go deal with something, and then you come back to the town only to discover that every single villager has been hit with your Hold Person spell. And I think there could be a lot of really funny role-playing aspects of that. Maybe 1 or 2 villagers made a saving throw or broke out of it. Maybe the party's just like, we should probably try to save the village and dispel magic on all these guys. Or maybe they're just like, let's loot the houses and get out of here before anybody wakes up, kind of thing. I think there could be a lot of fun with that kind of thing. So I do like the idea of maybe different triggers or having those triggers as well. There's no reason you couldn't use both, you know. And I like the idea of it surging more often, because this is really where my problems with the Wild Magic Sorcerer come in, which is that I'm playing this class because I want weird and crazy things to happen. But when it's only a 1/20, the chances of that happening are so low. And, you know, I've heard of people saying that they've gone an entire campaign and never had a Wild Magic Surge. Now, like, I don't know if they went all the way to 1/20, maybe it was only a 5th level campaign or something, right? But, I mean, we had a Wild Magic Sorcerer in one of our campaigns that went to, I think, 10th or 11th level, and they had 1 Wild Magic Surge. That was it, just 1. And I can't remember what the result was, but it wasn't anything particularly noteworthy. So, I mean, that just feels really bad. Like, you're playing this class for a reason, and the main reason is for Wild Magic Surges. If you just wanted to be a wizard, you'd be a wizard, you know? If you wanted to be something that was just normal and straightforward and by the numbers, you wouldn't have picked Wild Magic Sorcerer. So, I just want the class to kind of do what it already does, but do it more and maybe make it like even crazier and even funner. And so when I complain about this class, it's not that I don't like the idea behind it. And I know there's probably going to be people in the comment section that are like, well, I played a Wild Magic Sorcerer and all these crazy things happen, and they'll talk about all these memorable events. And that's my point. I love that stuff. I want it to happen even more though. I don't want it to be just, oh, you rolled a 1 on a d20, now finally you got a surge. Good thing you're 17th level and this is the first one of your career. Like, and I know that you can house rule this kind of stuff. And if I was the dungeon master and I had a player who wanted to play a Wild Magic Sorcerer, I would definitely talk to him about this kind of stuff. And if I was playing a Wild Magic Sorcerer in somebody's campaign, I would definitely talk to the dungeon master and say, hey, what do you think about, surges happening a lot more often? Or what about the idea of rolling a d10 instead of a d20 and having a mount? Or maybe having it tied to the level of the spell. Like the more powerful the spell is, the more likely you are to trigger a surge, right? So, maybe you roll a d10 and it's just 1 per rank of the spell. So if you cast a first level spell, it's only triggering on a 1. But if you cast a 9th level spell, it's only not triggering on a 10, Like that could be a lot of fun. The idea that the more powerful the spell is, the harder it is for you to contain this chaos magic. I love those kind of concepts. I wish, and I just said a minute ago that I love the Wild Magic Surge table. I'm not complaining about the table at all. And I know there's a lot of events that fit specifically what I'm going to say. But I wish that some of the results were more tied to what you were doing. And I know people are like, yeah, there's tons of results that, if you cast a spell, but it does it, but this, but that, whatever. I'm not, that's fine. But I do wish that, a lot of the results were just tied to whatever spell you were casting, but now you just, you cast Hold Monster, but now you hit everything. You tried to cast Fireball, but, maybe the Fireball blows up in like a 1 mile radius and you just like accidentally nuke everything, That kind of stuff would be really cool. I love that kind of concept. And, if your party's willing to forgive you blowing them up with fireballs on a regular basis, and so much the better. So, like I said, I really like the concept. I don't have a lot more else to say about the class. These are just kind of my general thoughts on it. This isn't like a specific build or anything like that. I love the concept. I wish that the implementation was maybe a little better. It feels like Wizards of the Coast had some really cool ideas, but they just probably didn't take it far enough, honestly. Maybe they were worried that if they made it too crazy, nobody'd want to play it or something. But I already think that this class is only going to appeal to certain types of people. And if you're already trying to appeal to those kind of people who just want to have some crazy fun and they don't care that they might potentially TPK the entire group, then just go all in with that concept and make it even more crazy and even more fun. Because to me, I don't want my sorcerer to feel like a bargain basement wizard. I want them to feel unique and interesting. And, like I said, you don't have ritual magic. You have an inferior spell list to the wizard. Yeah, you got to have something to make up for all that. And meta magic goes a long way, but I don't want to just feel like a wizard who can occasionally quicken cast a spell or twin a spell or, hide in a spell, whatever. I want to feel like a different class entirely. And I think that's one of the things I love about the concept of the Wild Magic Sorcerer. But having seen them played at the table, if you just do it rules as written, they don't feel very unique. Because unless you're getting a Wild Magic Surge, they're really, nothing special is really happening. So anyways, those are my thoughts on the class. Kind of a shorter video in this one. I just wanted to give my thoughts on how the class feels and what I want to see from the class more. And I would seriously look to house rule a lot of stuff on this and just probably make the surges even more often. Maybe look online for some people who've done their own Wild Magic Surge tables and expand the tables even more and get even crazier results. I love those kind of ideas. I just really wish that the Sorcerer in general kind of stood out a little more and was just a little more unique than the Wizard. Because I really like the idea that you're just like born with this magic inside you. If you look at a lot of like fantasy literature, a lot of what we consider wizards in fantasy literature are probably more like D&D 5th edition sorcerers. A lot of these people, they have the magic inside them, and it's more about learning to control it and how to use it properly. A lot of people have like an innate gift for magic kind of thing, or they got their magic through some sort of event, Maybe they had two parents that were both wizards, but now the magic's just in your blood. You didn't have to study the way they did. The magic's just innate, and it's about learning to control it. So I love that concept, I just wish it was implemented a little better. But anyways, those are my thoughts. I'm starting to get repetitive, so I think we'll end the video there. Feel free to like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and mostly leave me your comments. I'm sure that there'll be some crazy stories in the comment section about people who've played played Wild Magic Sorcerers and had some zany and ridiculous things happen. I would look forward to reading those stories, and I hope that people watching this video don't take this the wrong way, that I'm like ripping on the class, complaining about it. I love the concept. I love so much about this class. I just wish that those good aspects about the class were just like taken to that next level. That's all I'm trying to say here. So maybe you agree with me, maybe you don't. Maybe you really like the class, but after hearing me say this, you're like, yeah, you know what? I only had a couple surges, and those surges were awesome. Those were like memorable events, you know. But I wish it would have happened more. And I think that's where a lot of the potential of this class comes in. You know, no one's going to remember about the 400th time you cast Magic Missile on a goblin and killed it. But you will remember the one time you accidentally fireballed your party at level 1 and had a TPK. That kind of stuff will live on forever. So, you know, just embrace that and go with it even more. Anyways, those are my thoughts. So I'll see you next time in the dungeon.